Okay, 86%. Let's go with that. Now,
You close the poll and we should be able to, then you
okay.
should be able to share
Did it come up?
it. Not yet. It's my screen, so let's ask someone else if it came up. Oh, you may have to, I wonder if you had to be the presenter.
Victoria said yes, it's back.
Okay.
So hold on a minute. I'm going to share the screen. Can you see it now? Or I'll make myself.
There we go. We see it.
You do see it now, I think.
So we have 75% said it was true it's used to progress monitor specific behaviors. 83% said it increases ratio of positives to correctives and supports student self-monitoring, and 42% say it is synonymous with check and check out. So the correct answer is B and C. A is a little tricky, and I understand why you thought that. Here is the distinction, and we can hit A and D at the same time. The daily progress report is the progress monitoring tool. That is the data piece, and that is the piece that you use to progress monitor. Check and check out is an intervention, and the intervention consists of a student being greeted in the morning, having and being able to check in with the teacher throughout the day, who increases the ratio of positives to correctives so, around the expectations. And it's designed to help the student get a better sense of when they are doing it correctly and when they might not be doing it correctly. So it's designed to increase a student's internal awareness of their behavior and how it is aligned with the classroom expectations. And the intervention is designed to support the teacher in increasing the ratio of positives to correctives for those students who need a little bit more. The daily progress report can be used with or without the check-in, check-out intervention. You could use that with SAGE, you could use it with mentoring. The student could or could not carry it around with them. That's the daily progress report, and we encourage everyone to have that, use that as a progress monitoring tool. People sometimes confuse that the form is not check-in, check-out. Any questions or comments regarding that? Why don't we just try, why don't we first try raising our hands so we're not talking on top of each other, and then Stephanie will call on you and unmute you, and you can unmute yourself, I mean. So I would really like to get comments from people about that.
Oh, Rebecca, would you unmute yourself, please?
Thank you, Rebecca.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I just had a question about a comment that you just said pertaining to this question. You said, you mentioned when a kid doesn't want to carry the DPR form. So how do you get the scores? How does the greeter get the end of the score or the end of the day points when they don't want to carry the DPR form? For example, right now I have a student who doesn't want to bring it to specials. So I try my best to have contact with them at the end of the day to get their score, but that's not always possible.
I'm gonna share some of the things I've heard, and then let's just kind of open it up to get feedback from other people. Sometimes it's done via Google Docs, so that then it's the responsibility of the teacher to go in and enter how the student did during that period. I think the daily progress report has been around a longer time than check-in, check-out, and sometimes teachers didn't. I think traditionally when people were using the daily progress report, the student wasn't the one that was holding on to that. That's a unique feature of check-in, check-out, and that is one of the individualized features that you might do for a student who refuses to take the form to all of the classes, like specials, is that you do some type of modification around that. So you still get that teacher's input, but if they're not going to carry the form, you know, stop pushing that one.
And sometimes it's a matter of why don't they want the form? Are the teachers expecting them to bring the form up to them? Or is the teacher walking around the room and monitoring everybody just like they do for, say, assignment completion, depending on the grade? I know it's not the same across all grades, but and then the teacher at the end of the period is just walking around, seeing where everyone's at, checking planners if that's the situation in your context. And then just that one student or 2 or 3 students that have check in, check out are on the check in, check out system intervention, they check their with their teacher at that point. And sometimes that's not as it doesn't make kids feel like they stand out as much as the student having to walk up to the teacher at the end of the class period.
Can we have some other comments from other people? I'm curious about how other people handle that.
And for the person that had the high school question, that's what I thought of when I read your question, is the Google Doc and the option of having that right on Google, where the parents, the teachers, and the student could have access to that, and the teachers could only have the editing access, whereas the parent and the student could just have the ability to look at it access.
And I think that applies to middle school too. I think there are quite a few middle schools that don't have the student carry the form around. They use a Google Doc. And then the coordinator is the one that, it's kind of a little bit harder for the coordinator because they have to remind the teachers to please, you know, these are the students, your students that are in check and check out. Please make sure that you're using that Google Doc.
At our school, at the elementary level, we have our check and check out forms on NCR paper, so they are double. So the students do carry around the sheets with them throughout the day. In like lunch and recess, the teacher will just set the sheet outside of the room or whatever for the younger kids. But then at the end of the day, they complete the sheet, go check out, and then the NCR copy, the yellow copy or whatever, gets left for the coordinator to fill out the data on, and then the white sheet goes home with the students, so then the parents can either sign and return it or keep it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that of having it outside the room, and then whoever is doing the transition knows it's there, and they can pick it up, and
yeah.
the student doesn't have to carry it around. I mean, depending on how hard, it can be hard to carry a paper like that out to a playground in Fayette. I mean, I don't know what I would do with it. It would probably be a big old mess. So that makes a lot of sense. Someone else was going to say something?
I was just going to say, like, the in like the kindergarten classroom, for instance, they go out for recess first, and so then the teacher leaves like the cold lunches and stuff in a crate outside of her door, and she just puts the check in, check out sheets right in that crate. So as they walk down through from recess or whatever, the recess aide that's walking them in can just pick it up and quick sign off for recess.
Nice idea.
Thank you. Brian, do you want to share what you wrote?
Hi. Yeah, we have at the elementary level. We have students. We don't have students carry the DPR. We have teachers do that, and we have little clipboards that fit with the DPR, and teachers will hand that off. During specials, that's been tricky. So we will have kids carry those and check in with the teacher. And at lunchtime, we have our associates. Sometimes it's a big stack, but they'll gather the DPRs for the kids that they'll be monitoring, and take those out with them, and then give the kids feedback at the end of the recess period. And it works out pretty well.
Very good. Thanks so much for those comments. Any others there, Stephanie? Or should I move on?
Unless someone wants to raise their hand, we really, really, really appreciate your verbal comments and having this be a conversation. So, Lori, if you want to move on, then I can continue to monitor the chat.
Okay. Well, this is a bit of a setup. It's basically reiterating what we said, that the check-in, check-out is an intervention, and it is not the DPR form. The intervention, just to kind of review, is designed to support teachers in increasing the ratio of positives to correctives. It supports students in self-monitoring. It includes a greeter at the beginning and end of the day. So there are some very specific features that make that an intervention. The form, that daily progress report, is the collection tool. So yes, it is used as a prop for the teacher to make sure that she's providing more positives to correctives, but the form itself is what goes to the data collection person and what is entered into the database and what is used to determine, is this student making progress or not. It's used to determine, do we need to switch up check in, check out? Do we need to make it a little bit more individualized? Do we need to add an intervention? Is the student succeeding, and can we wean them off of the intervention? And I think this is one of the things that I feel as a trainer is probably the most difficult to get across during training, because a lot of times people aren't implementing more than one intervention, is that the DPR form can be used with or without check in, check out. Now, it makes sense that we're asking people to layer on interventions. But when we talk about that population of students that need a little bit more, that is when we need to do things more individualized. And if a student is not going to the greeter and they don't want to carry around the form and they're resisting check in, check out, layering on means that you're still progress monitoring. You're still using, and seeing how they're doing, and maybe the teacher is still increasing the ratio of positives to correctives, but a lot of the pieces of the intervention of check in, check out are not being used. So it would be very difficult to say the student is really on check in, check out when they're not going to a greeter and they're not carrying the form, because that's the visual piece of it. But they could be going into a say group and relearning the proper etiquette and the proper procedure for being on the playground. And the person on the playground could be making sure that they're doing all that, and they're using that daily progress report to see how they're doing.
Lori, excuse me, I think
ahead.
you have to share your screen again.
Oh, you didn't even see my screen? Okay.
When I close out the poll, I think you have to just hit. There you go. Thank you.
You can see it now?
Hold on. Yes.
You can see it?
I can see it. I'm hoping others can. Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Man, you missed my great visuals here. Okay. Unless there's another question regarding this, though, I'm going to move on. Check in, check out is also not mentoring. So one of the things that we sometimes see is where there is each student gets their own individual greeter, and that is getting pretty close to being mentoring. One of the things you can see is the greeter is following the protocol for what it means to be a greeter. Is they should be able to greet about 5 students at the beginning of the day and 5 students at the end of the day, sometimes even more. It's very brief. You're not, you're maybe making sure that you're just letting them know you're glad to see them, a little bit about how their day went, maybe reinforcing if they did a good job, maybe a comment or two, oh, what do you think you can do to improve there? But it's very brief, making sure maybe they have their materials, depending on if you want to add that element for the greeter. But it's very brief. And in a 6 to 9 week period of time, that person, the student, should be successful with check and check out for 70% of the students. So it's meant to be a much shorter time frame. Mentoring is really about relationship. And the way that we presented it, and there are a lot of different forms of mentoring, but the way that we presented it in the training was really the conversation that goes on between the mentor and the student is about relationship building. It isn't necessarily talking about how they're doing during the day. That is not the main goal of it. It is to help that student become connected to at least one person in the school. and it's something that happens probably over the course of the whole year. It doesn't necessarily have an academic and behavior focus. So any questions with regard to that piece?
Please raise your hand. Rebecca, if you unmute yourself, you can talk. Thank you.
I actually still had a question from the previous slide. I couldn't find the hand in time, but it still kind of goes together with this.
Okay.
You mentioned for the kids who are in check and check out, and you add on that additional layer of support for SAG or even a behavior intervention plan. If they're not in the traditional check and check out where they're meeting with a greeter, at the beginning, at the end of the day, say they're just in a SAG and they have maybe a brief intervention plan, do they still carry that DPR form to monitor I just want to clarify, so you're saying they still carry the DPR form to monitor the SAG or the behavior intervention plan?
Well, Rebecca, I think if the student is willing to carry that form, go ahead and do it. But my guess is if the only piece that they're resistant to is the greeter, the first thing I would look at is who's the greeter. If they're resistant to carrying the form, then it is perfectly fine for them not to do that.
But then you're saying the teacher should still do that because otherwise, if they're in a SAG, we wouldn't have a way to monitor the progress, correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that piece?
So are you saying, though, if we do have a kid who's resistant to carrying the form, if they are in a SAG, should we still have the teacher carry the form so we have a way to monitor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's exactly it. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions with that one, Steph?
There are not, but we would appreciate any regarding the check in, check out, comparing that, versus the mentoring slide. Were there any ahas during this discussion about how you can have, it should be more than one, it doesn't have to be, but it's quick enough to have more than one student per greeter in the morning and at night, in the afternoon? I think.
Okay. So let's go over the best practices for the greeter. That kind of moves us right into this. Welcoming the student by name. I think one of the things that I just got done doing, listening to a presentation by one of our culturally responsive TACs, and they were saying, for instance, if you have students that are of Indian descent, Native descent, or Latino, or from another country, how important it is that you correctly pronounce their name. It's a little thing, but sometimes it's very difficult. But basically that you're welcoming that student, and if you can correctly pronounce their name, that helps. It's a very brief check-in. They collect their form, they're given a new one. You can or may not check supply. That's kind of like an add-on if you decide to do that. I think in the video that people were shown, the greeter actually had like spare pencils and paper and things that they could give to the student if they didn't have their supplies. That's not necessarily, I mean, you can or you cannot do that piece of it. And you are acknowledging their effort. The focus is really on their effort. I know that there have been some schools that have actually had just a little sheet for their greeters so that they were very clear on what their role was. I know it's not it's fairly easy, but I think it helps sometimes just to be really clear about what that is. I think one other thing for a greeter is it's important to have a backup greeter. If the greeter is absent, who does the student go to, and to make that transition fairly easily. So can people kind of share anything about their greeter and maybe how they account for if the greeter is absent? Kind of curious about that. Can you hear me?
Rebecca, would you want to speak right now?
Sure. I know what we do here at Crandon is before a kid enters check and check out, our check and check coordinator meets with the greeter and the student, and then I'm a greeter also. So right away on that first day before that student even enters check and check out, we have a plan of who they would go to if I was absent.
Very good.
And then I make sure that that greeter has extra copies of the DPR form available, so
Very good.
they can do that.
I know in one of the schools that I worked with, the difficulty we had was some of the students on check and check out were also tardy, and the greeter was only available during a very specific time frame. So we had the secretary be the greeter for the ones that were absent or tardy.
One of our participants also wanted to know who people use for their greeters, like what roles.
That's
teachers.
correct. So can people respond to that? Who do you have as your greeter? Rebecca, what role are you?
I am the school counselor, but we also use our reading interventionists play a major role in our tier 2. So one of the so they're greeters too, but we found for classroom teachers it's really difficult. But support staff, secretaries, and specials seem to work the best.
Okay. Can we hear from other people too?
Brian said they have backup greeters in place, that people that are usually familiar with the students already, so that they're comfortable if they have to go to that person.
Okay.
Victoria said we use our student services secretary as one of our primary greeters. We also use our LMC para. And Christopher said at the K2 level they use their school counselors. And Gary, share.
Yeah, we a lot of times will use the we have house systems, so we will use a house teacher because they will know specifically, you know, what maybe that student needs a little more help with. But we do, I'm an Explorer teacher besides being the PBIS building coach, so I'm actually a greeter for a student too. And, you know, we look for teachers that have positive rapport with that student. That's the most thing. The most important thing is that they're positive and they can be positive with that student.
At our elementary school, we have approximately 350 students, so kind of a smaller school, but we use any staff member, and what I do is when I see that they need to be on check and check out, I will actually just send an all-staff email and ask if anyone has developed a connection with that student, or, you know, it could be a past teacher, it could be a student that we're trying to build a relationship with for next year for their teacher, but usually just kind of put a feeler out there if anybody already has some sort of a connection with them that would be willing to be their greeter.
Yeah, and again, you know, just because you only have one person that you're greeting, as long as you stay to what the guidelines are for the greeter and don't move into mentorship, I think that's absolutely great. I know at one of the schools I worked at, they did use teachers, but one of the things that they had to do is they had to really make an adjustment in what they did at the beginning and end of the day in the school schedule so that there was more independent, you know, kind of like a bell work done at the beginning so that the teacher could greet maybe 2 or 3 students within their wing. But that makes it a little bit more difficult because the teacher is multitasking.
Okay, Tammy.
Go ahead.
Tammy said we have classroom teachers as well as specialists. For grade level, we try to do the next grade to try to build a connection. And Brian added,
that's a good idea.
Brian added, we usually use our associates as their schedules are easier to work with. These are folks that are positive and want to work as a greeter. We have one teacher acting as a greeter who has a great relationship with the student he works with.
Okay. Very good. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Okay. So here's another oops. And I'm sorry, I can't remember, but someone did make the comment about people want to know about individualized check-in, check-out. The way the system is designed, it's meant to be an efficiency system. And we as educators really are in love with individualization. That is why it is stressed so much in the training to begin with the generic check-in, check-out, where it's one form, it's very specific greeters, you know, pretty much the format is the same. When you begin switching it up, it makes it a little bit more difficult for the greeter. You should have a 70% success rate at the generic before moving on. So when you do your checking to see if the intervention is working, you want to separate out if you have generic and if you have individualized. Let me see, do you have slides on individualized check-in, check-out, Stephanie?
Yes, Lori, is it on the next slide? Did you add it into the PowerPoint? Okay.
Maybe at the end. Okay, so let me look.
So if you go back, okay.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. So here are some examples of individualized check-in, check-out. You add a check-in before a problematic time of day. So if you know the student is having an especially hard time during recess or maybe after recess, you can have an additional time when they connect with their greeter. You have a buddy, this would be another student that accompanies the youth when checking in and checking out. A lot of times that happens with the young people, with the really little ones, the kindergartners in first grade. Sometimes people ask us, well, what do you do when people really want to keep connected with check in, check out with their older students and, you know, they've really succeeded? Well, sometimes having them be buddies gives them a chance to still get that extra interaction, recognizing that they already have their behavior in hand, but they still may need a little bit, I don't know, just something to connect with the staff and with the school in a different way, and having them, you know, just kind of support a younger student so that they know where they're supposed to go for check-in, check-out, and the greeter. That's one way of doing it. The youth checks in with an adult at his locker in the morning. That might be, so then, you know, they don't go to the greeter goes to them. That might be an individualized feature. When you do any kind of individualization, you want to make sure that you're tracking that differently so that you can tell, is this individualization really working? Any other comments you want to put in there, Stephanie?
No, I think that
Marlene?
the only other thing I would say is that when you add a, this is getting into SAG a little bit, but if you add onto the daily progress report the focus of why the student is in a SAG group, and I can show you a DPR that would have that on it, then you're not individualizing it. You're just adding an additional goal, but it still fits under your be responsible, be respectful, be safe, or whatever your 3 to 5 expectations are in your building.
Yeah, and the piece with that is it's a way of communicating from whoever is holding the SAG to the teacher about what you want the teacher to specifically target in on. If you have a few little bullet points under be safe, which is, you know, keep all points of the chair on the floor at all times, you know, use your words, whatever it is you have, the teacher would, you know, maybe make sure that they are reinforcing when the student is doing a good job with that. But that's not all that's included in being safe. So they may do that and still get a 1 instead of a 2 if they were unsafe in some creative way. But it just is a really nice communication and also serves as reminders for the student about what they have been practicing in their small group and what they should be focusing on in the classroom. But again, it's a modification, but it's not necessarily considered individualized.
So again, the focus is to be efficient, and the more we individualize for the more students, the less efficient we become. So the goal is to start with the generic and then have a data point at which, when you're reflecting and looking at the data, you say, this isn't working, what do we need to do? what intervention do we need to layer on, it could be individualizing check-in, check-out. So questions around that, or comments around individualized check-in, check-out. If you want to share what you do to individualize, or what works for some of your students, that would be helpful for everybody, I think, to hear. So Victoria asks, can the DPR form change for individualized check-in, check-out? Victoria, would you mind unmuting yourself and maybe explaining or telling us more information?
So in our building, when our students have their Aurora card, one thing that our teams will do, because we're kind of in a house system at 5th and 6th grade, they focus on the students' specific aspects of school-wide expectations from the matrix within Be Safe, Be Responsible as little examples under those headers. We're not feeling like that's individualized, because that's really the reminder of what we want that child to be working on from the matrix. But I think what we're struggling with is, I feel like for sure we are definitely at easily 30% of our kids are not being successful with check-in, check-out because they don't want to carry the sheet. They don't have a connection to why that's important, or other reasons. And so we're trying to figure out how to individualize that so that they can see that they can be successful. And we've been doing various things, like we've been cutting up the form so that it's in 3 different aspects, because we have 3 categories on our matrix. So in each class, this teacher only shows the student one aspect of it. Are those individualizing it, I guess, is my question?
You know, there's a couple of things I just want to ask you. Do your classroom teachers have classroom matrices that are specific to the classroom setting?
Yes.
So, but your check-in, check-out form is specific to the school-wide setting?
All of the classroom, I should have been more specific. All of the classrooms have the same top categories as our school-wide matrix. And
like
then,
Be Safe, Responsible, Respectful, right? They have the same expectations?
yes. And then within that, in the matrix, things will tweak based on the classroom. And so they'll put in there, you know, what they want that child to focus on. Because, you know, in our matrix, we have, you know, like 8 locations. So we try to kind of narrow it down for that student before we head off into a behavior plan. But I don't want to put 30% of our students into a behavior plan.
Yeah, I want to go into a little bit more about the classroom matrix. With the classroom matrix, the environments change. So you don't have bathroom, playground. What you have is transition time, entering the classroom, independent work time. You have some things that are specific. And the reason that I'm saying that is that if you have a check-in, check-out form that reflects the school-wide environment, and most of the misbehaviors are happening in the classroom setting, which is pretty often, then your form isn't really, there's a mismatch there, which is why we usually have for the generic form just be safe, responsible, respectful, and don't go into it more, so that within the classroom setting, when a teacher is giving feedback, that's when they individualize it. Look, this is what our classroom matrix says it takes to be respectful or responsible. It means that you have your homework. It means that you, whatever. So, you know, tell me, what do you think you get, a 0, a 1, or 2 with regard to be respectful for this math period? Just about all of the times when the students are getting their feedback, it comes from the classroom setting. That's the way check-in and check-out is designed. So I'm just inviting you to relook at, I understand the power of reminders, but I think that may be part of the problem in the design.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. That just may be one place to look. The other place to look is if you dig a little bit deeper, where are the kids not being successful? Why is that? Is it the same for all of them? Is it different for all of them? Is it that they're not carrying their forms? Is it what is it? And again, you're looking now at what, 5th and 6th graders?
Yes.
Okay, so there might be, and I'm going to go into something else here, and this might be something that helps you gain their interest in it. And because I'm looking at time and we don't have a lot of time, this is a big one that came up, which is how to use tickets effectively. So my resource for this was actually the book by Leon Hawkins, Responding to Problem Behaviors in Schools, the Behavior Education Program. And the BEP is something that if you think back and when you saw the video, they called the BEP program. That's basically what Check In, Check Out is. We took it from her work. So this is what she says. When to give the ticket: for checking in, for checking out. Up to you if you want to do it for returning the form with the parent signature. Especially in the first 2 weeks, when students are just being introduced to this, you want to have them be motivated to do it. And that is when that ticket system is helpful. Now, one of the things she points out is the drawings are held weekly, and they're held within the pool of check-in, check-out students. So it's not like these tickets are given to put in the pot with everyone else. I think, and that is actually for me just a refinement. If the student is following and improving their behavior in the classroom with the help of check-in, check-out, they should be given more tickets in the regular setting for when they're doing the right thing. These tickets are specific to using the program, to doing what they need to do, the procedures for doing check-in, check-out. It can be combined with something like mystery motivator, so that the students who are in check-on, check-out, they pick like maybe 2 or 3 things, simple things that they would like, and they never know if they get picked what it is that they'll get. Can post winners where only the other check-in, check-out students can see. So it's almost like, some people call this a special club, and it's almost, I mean, kids kind of like clubs and like to feel like they're a part of it, but you're building, it's a way to build and have them feel connected with a group of kids who are doing the same thing in a very fun way that's motivating. With regard to giving a ticket for making the goal, if you do that, and you can do that, but these are some of the criteria to think about. You set a goal that's attainable during the first 2 weeks. So what they're saying is goal setting is really important with the check-in, check-out. We say eventually, for me, it's always 80% of the time that the student gets 80%, makes 80% of the points 4 out of 5 days a week. However, in the beginning, that goal may not be good. So one of the things you might want to think about doing is just use the DPR form for the first week with the teacher to get a baseline of where that student is and create a goal that's higher than what their baseline is but may not yet be at 80% so that they can reach success. So it's another thing if they're failing and they're not enrolled, it sounds like they are failing, is the goal set at the right place to begin with? They get the ticket when they meet their goal a certain number of times, such as 5, versus, oh, this week you got 80%, so you get the ticket. No, it's after the 5th time, even if that takes them 3 weeks, they get an extra ticket because they made their goal 5 times. It's a more powerful way to use it. And then she introduced also the concept of a check-in, check-out credit card, which I think for 5th and 6th graders, they may go for this, which is, for instance, if I get 95%, I get 2 points on my credit card. If I get 80%, I get 1 point, and if I get below that, I don't get any punches on my credit card. And I can use that to buy things in a store. I can either, use that to be put in a general raffle now for something small or something big, but I can bank my points. So those are ways that I think might help with some 5th and 6th graders, get them more interested in the program. I also want to say that the whole thing with this tickets, to remember the general ideas behind the use of using tickets, is you want to phase out as the internal motivators kick in. You're doing this so that they can begin to have more success in the regular setting. So after 3 weeks or so, when they begin to get that success, you want to somehow scale that number of tickets they get down. And the coordinator is the person who manages the reinforcement, not whoever is doing it for the general regular population. So that was a lot of information, and I'd like to open it up to see people's reactions and any other comments in terms of how you guys use tickets with check and check out. I see, let me see. Rebecca said this is their third year of check and check out. Attention-seeking students thrive on universal forms. Students who have a skill deficit really need to focus on the specific behaviors. I think that's a really good point in looking to see if you have the right success rate is, do you have the right kids in there? And I know that people wanted to have entrance and exit criteria, and I see we have 5 minutes more, so I do want to make sure we have a little time for that. Yes, I can email the slideshow, Sarah. Any hands raised, any other comments with regard to this that you see, Stephanie? Okay, I'm not hearing anything from Stephanie, so I'm wondering if something happened there. So if you have a comment.
Here I am. Gary, we'll do you first, Gary.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. I had a student the first day of check-in and check-out, didn't get a single signature or a student or a single staff member to sign his form, and I realized that I think it was just shyness. He was just nervous to approach the teachers. So the next day I offered him a reward immediately, and all of a sudden we got every single signature. It was just one of those things where the ticket idea is great, but I wanted to do it as soon as possible just to get him on track. And we talked about what reward he wanted. And I think, you know, it just needed to be very immediate. I guess that's my point.
Yeah, I think this first part, what you're doing is you're reinforcing the student using the system. And the second part is reinforcing that and acknowledging the progress that they're making. And the other thing that Stephanie, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, Stephanie and I were saying that this is a lot, and it'd be nice if we just gave you one formula, but the thing with the reinforcement and the use of tickets, play with it. Find something that works. I wanted to give you some ideas of different and innovative ways that you can use those. Hopefully you got some ideas, but the 70% rule is there. It says, look at the system. Do I need to look a little deeper? Do we need to switch things up? And maybe how you use tickets is one of the places where you need to switch up. Go ahead.
Rebecca, go ahead.
I give cardinal cash just if they check in and they check out, regardless if they meet their goal or not. And then what I'll do, depending on the kid, is sometimes we'll have like a weekly goal. So if they reach their weekly goal, then it's kind of up to the kid on what they want to do that week.
I also see something about CorePad. Can someone share that resource?
Brian, would you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, it's an app we use. It's called ChorePad, and there is a small cost for it. But what's nice about it for the kids we work with is when they do check in, if they meet their goal for the day, check in on time, bring their home report back, they can get check marks on this app. It makes cool sounds. Kids like that. And then that app tracks the amount of points that they've earned, and then they can cash those points in through the app. So it's a way for us to easily track how many points they have, how many points they've spent, and they can get $1 at the school store. They can earn some time in the gym to shoot some buckets with a friend, lunch in playing with a friend, things like that. Just a variety of things that they can use those points for.
And Brian, do you use that for universally, or is that just for certain students?
We use it for everyone on check-in, check-out. So when we have a greeter identified, we make sure that they have an iPad. I load that app on. When I enroll a student to check-in, check-out, and walk through the program with them, I'll take a mugshot, put that in the app because they'll have like a card with their picture on it, and explain how to use the app, explain check-in, check-out, how it works. They'll meet the greeter, etc. So yeah, we'll just have that set up for each greeter.
Thank you.
I want to make sure that, I know that people still want some information having to do with entrance and exit, so I think what we're going to look at is maybe extending, because it feels to me like there were still a lot of questions and still things that we could have talked more about. So if there are things that you still want, if you want us to extend this to the next time that we meet, please enter that in the chat box so that we know, and if there's something specific, and I know we didn't get to entrance and exit criteria, so maybe that's what we focus on for the next one, but please communicate to us what you want more of for the next session.
And what I have, Lori, is entrance, exit criteria, which goes along with data decision making, how to fade, high school specific,
yeah.
and yeah, and that's about it. So if there's more than that, specific.
I am going to say something very quickly about high school specific. It is very different, and one of the things is if you can let us know who asked that question, we can give you information about the webinar for academic seminar. At the high school level, you almost have to have a class, and it's within that class, and it contains more than just check-in, check-out. So it does look very different, and a lot of times people use academic seminar, and that's where they have something check-in, check-out like with that particular group of students. So if you give that to us, we'll make sure to let you know how to be a part of those webinars. They come out of, it's a national base. It's not just Wisconsin. So they're Jessica Swain Bradley is the one who moderates those, I think.
And I can look back to see who wrote about the high school. Okay. And Rebecca, we will, that's a great question for the future, is how is check-in, check-out explained to all students? We're finding that some kids think this is something for naughty kids. And traditionally, and with our behavior plans, it was thought of that way. And we're, we as adults need to shift our thinking, and it's hard to sometimes explain that to kids as well. So that's a future discussion. Any other future
Rebecca,
topics?
What grades, Rebecca? Are you at the elementary?
Yes, I'm K through 5, but I find it more with 4th and 5th graders than I do early elementary.
Yeah, they have more experience with that. Okay.
So, Lori, did we have a closing slide, or let's skip?
I think nope, we didn't. Not really. Oh yeah. Well, we already did this one. This is a closing.
Okay.
Yeah. If there are any biggest barriers you face in gearing up from check-in to a full program, and the biggest barriers in implementing other Tier 2 interventions, if you could put that in the chat box as well, we would appreciate it. And as people are putting things in chat box, if there's any other questions that you have or comments.
Otherwise, we're just wrapping this up and are excited for the next time that you can join us.
I believe maybe, Stephanie, we can send out another one of those Google Docs with regard to this question, so that if you do need to leave and you have something else that you have scheduled, you can look for that particular Google Doc so that we can get some information regarding these last two questions.
So the email that I sent out on October 8th, go ahead and use that same Google Doc. I'm not going I'll just use the same one and not create a new one.
Okay.
I can send that link out again because if you're like me, you lose track of that link.
Yeah.
But we'll just keep using the same document. Really, we're open to any suggestions. So if you would like to communicate via Google Docs, like for example, what entrance and exit criteria you use, how do you grade students, we can definitely, you could just post a question in there if that's something that you want to do.
So Stephanie, why don't we post these two questions in that Google Doc?
Okay, that sounds
so
good.
that they don't forget what the questions are.
So Victoria, you said there something about a Google group. Could you mind unmuting and talking a little bit about that? The people that have time and want to stay on, they're welcome to listen. Otherwise, if you need to go, we understand that too. Some people have already had to leave.
I was just curious if we could utilize a Google group because then we could see what people are posting and it would be easier than a Google Doc. Otherwise, you have to be very intentional about going into the Google Doc.
So you're talking like a Google Plus community?
Sure. Sure.
Is that what you utilize?
Yeah.
Okay. I think Lori, we could talk about that, and if we decide on that, we'll definitely invite you, everybody.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I like that. And I know what you mean.
Of course, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, but I'm going to have to increase my learning curve here, but it sounds like a good idea. It's easier than Google Doc, I'm for it.
It is, yeah. And Lori, we have that in our region, the Google Plus page, so I know how to do that.
Okay, great.
There's also just a Google group, though, that's basically you're just posting things. Yeah, and then there can be online discussion. You don't have to necessarily do a webinar through Google Group, through the Google Plus community.
Okay, that I don't know. I'm not sure of that. So
is that kind of like where we would just take everyone who's registered for this, and we would just do it like an email, but it just goes back and forth for everyone who's in that group?
Yep.
Ah. Okay. So it's like, so let me see if I'm understanding this. So Stephanie sent out to everyone who was registered the Google Doc. But we could just as easily have posted this question and people just respond to it, and we just keep that kind of a dialogue going on.
Yes.
Okay, kind of like what we were talking, what went on, Stephanie, with the high school discussion that we were having on tax.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm picturing.
Oh, it's just an email group.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Victoria, is it just an email group?
Well, you can set it so that it'll email you when something is posted, and then you know to go into the group.
Okay.
And you can then post things in the group.
Okay, I'll look into it.
Okay. Great suggestion.
You can also reply all in the email. I mean, there's many ways that you can respond, but yeah.
Great. Okay.
Well, thank you for those comments about future barriers and future topics. We will definitely keep that. Otherwise, we are all set. Thank you, everybody. This was a great session. Lori, any parting thoughts?
Actually, I have a question about the Google group.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need a Gmail account for that to work, or is it more of any email will work for that?
Oh, Victoria's not on anymore. Is that David?
Yes, it is.
So that is a good question. That's something that we have to look into.
Okay.
I haven't ever used it. Does anyone else know? Okay. We will ask our tech gurus.
Is that a barrier for you, David?
No. It's most of my stuff. This is my like my Outlook email.
Yeah.
But I also have a Gmail. So if one works better, then I would probably switch over to that email account. Other than whatever works best.
Right, okay.
Hey, one more thing before you sign out, David, totally unrelated. Can you email me the sign-in sheets from Wednesday?